Hello, good evening, welcome. I believe we're live now, and you can, if you can. Oh, there I am echoing. Okay, so I got to turn my sound down. Welcome, welcome. I'm just to see there's a few of you here now. I guess three people. If you can, let me know who you are and where you're watching from. Or I guess if just by letting me know where you're watching from lets me know who you are. So I'm always curious. Sometimes I have a fairly international crowd, and sometimes just U.S. and occasionally Canada. Um, I know it's rather late in Europe, but sometimes I get a straggler from Sweden or the Middle East, and so I always find that interesting. Um, I have a coworker here tonight, Angela, and um, she's tuning in from Baltimore, Maryland, or the vicinity of Baltimore. And so I did start this painting over on Instagram just to try to convince some of my Instagram followers to come over and watch me on YouTube. And I always say that social media platforms can be rather sticky. People don't really like moving from so much from one to the other. Um, it's interesting because it's just usually one icon away on their home screen on their phone, so um, shouldn't be that hard. Anyway, and Jill's here too. She's popping in from Chicago, and this is a photo that Jill had taken. Um, that's a beautiful photo of her daughter, and she called the photo serious, and I'm calling it so serious. Um, and it's um, it's her with a oversized cable knit sweater with very large yarn. I'm gonna see if I can get some of the details of the sweater in the painting, but I'm not gonna go crazy over over all the small details. Okay, so I might as well get into it now since you guys are here to watch me paint. And so I just started putting in some of the darkest dark here along her cheek so I can better see the color and the form. And I might as well see if I can get some of the shapes in her chin too, because I want to get a little bit of sense of that reflected light that's showing up there. That's not quite the right brush, so I'm on a brush hunt. I think this one hasn't been used yet. It's a nice flat and it's good for chiseling a little bit. So I'm going to play around with this one for a while. And I'm going to go ahead and continue to try to sculpt out the forms in the face where I see that I haven't gone light enough. I'm going to push it lighter, and then where it needs to be darker, I'll push it darker to really start to get more of a sculptural sense of the head. Not really worried about small changes in value yet, but I'll be getting there soon. Just going after that overall sense of form. And I think I have her flesh tones just a little bit warmer than what it is. There's not, the light isn't drastically warm or cool. It's more of a neutral, kind of a balanced light that's on her face. So I'm not having a big shift in color in the shadows. Sometimes if there's a very cool light, the shadows will be very warm, and if there's a very warm light, the shadows will be blue or purplish and very cool overall. This is where I struggled a little bit in when I was working in Instagram to start to get the um, the forms in her nose. I'm feeling a little bit better now that I can start to get some of these subtle color changes, and so I'm starting to feel a little bit more the front, the top, and the sides of her nose. Is that really subtle shape? This is where I have to slow it down a little bit. That's what I learned. I always try to find good art videos online or DVDs of artists that I like, and kind of a lot of what those artists tend to talk about in their videos is stuff that I already know, and it just sort of reaffirms it. The thing that I learned actually the most that I didn't realize was um, when I look at these paintings of some other painters I like. An example would be Jeremy Lipking, and his brushstrokes look so fluid, and it looks like he just dashed them off. And but when I watch him in the video, he's when he gets down to some of these more exacting areas, he really does slow down quite a bit. And it really took me by surprise at first because I wasn't doing any of the strokes in my paintings. I wasn't painting that slow. I'm really trying to um, dash off the strokes quite quickly, thinking that that's how you get that look of it being painted quite quickly. And the fact of the matter is that it's not. It's a very sometimes very slow methodical strokes to get the detail exactly, to get the kind of control you need to get those sort of details right. Try to have the values in her eye, her iris, and the whites of her eyes just a little bit too erratic. So I need to pull some of those together a little bit before they start to read right. Okay, and I have the hero John Brady here saying, "Sup, AJ?" And just here painting. Um, Sometimes I get a few people that join in painting. You are welcome to paint along too. And at some point, I am going to do. I'm starting to pull together the materials for an absolute beginner's oil painting. Um, I don't think I really want to call it a course yet. It's just a series of information, materials, and videos that will help someone who's never painted in oils before to kind of make that leap. Someone who does artwork, does drawing, works in maybe other paint medium, but has been a little bit intimidated by oils. And the idea of the course is just to take some of the mystery out of it, just to demystify oils a little bit and to make it feel much more accessible so that someone feels that um, they feel comfortable enough just to go ahead and try it. And so I'm going to start off with doing something like a monochromatic painting so that someone who's intimidated by colors doesn't have to worry about that. They're just mixing to try to get the right values and the right value structure. And so that is just one exercise that I remember from school that was really helpful. And so um, going to put together a demo and a tutorial for doing just that, so people can go ahead and try to paint from the same resource that I set up in the video. Anyway, when I asked on my Instagram page who was interested in something like that, I got a very much larger response than I thought that I was going to get. So, but it is going to take a while to pull together all the information. I went ahead and um, I made a video just about my brush cleaning system, just how to keep the brush clean, how to manage the solvents, and um, before, after, and during the painting process. So anyone who was a little bit worried about the toxicity of the painting and figuring out what to do with solvents after they've painted. This really, that video that I posted this week is would be helpful for those people. Um, and John said, to say, hold on a second. John says, I've just about done it all. I feel like sometimes haven't done sculpture yet. And Bryden is here. I have all my supplies, but have yet to open a tube and make my first stroke. I'm not sure why, because I'm so excited to start. Well, hopefully, some of these things I'm putting together will encourage you to start, but sometimes it just is, a matter of just jumping right in. And so some of the demos I'm going to put together is just about how to prepare your panels, how to create a painting setup with an easel, um, how to make a palette very easily out of glass and some board and things like that. Just all the little small steps that people don't necessarily know how to do, just to get them moving in the right direction until they feel like they um, it's sort of like diving into a swimming pool. The first time you've done it, um, you just you're sort of nervous about it, but once you've jumped in, it's just like, oh well, that wasn't so bad. And so it's a little bit like that with oil paint. And I think there's also a lot of misconceptions about oil paint, that it's messy or toxic um, or what was the other thing? That just really hard to control. And actually, if you're buying the right paints and the right solvents, it's really not as toxic as you would think. No more toxic than painting using a lot of other materials. It used to be that paints used to have lead in them. There are paints with heavy metals in them still, but you don't have to use any of those paints if you don't want to. And they really aren't necessarily dangerous unless you start eating them. The ones like the cadmium colors. But I don't use any cad colors. I don't use any colors that have heavy metals in them, because what I'm after are the most intense colors, not the traditional ones. And the most intense colors tend to be the least toxic. Not that I'm going to go around eating them, but they aren't quite as dangerous as the heavy metal colors. Um, and um, so in terms of the fear of how dangerous oil paints are, and the thing that used to be the most dangerous is the turpentine, and there's no reason with with the quality materials now, the substitute materials, there's no reason to use turpentine. You have odorless mineral spirits. The one I use is Gamsol, which I use both to clean my brushes and to mix in my paints um, to thin my paints with. And you don't really need the kind of ventilation that you needed with turpentine. You don't have the smell. The It doesn't evaporate quite as quickly out of your containers. And so um, I know some people that use um, what is it called? Water mixable or um, water soluble oil paints, and it's because they think that it's easier to clean up. But I think that overall, I think that oil paints aren't difficult to clean. In fact, I don't really clean my brushes per se. I let them sit in the solvent as I'm working, and when I'm done, I just wipe them off, and that's just just a few wipes with a paper towel, and that's just about all. And don't bother with soap or trying to rinse them with soap and water. That's just completely unnecessary. Okay, so um, let me see. There's a few comments here that I missed. Um, John Hero, the hero John Brady says, "Can you send me the reference for this and the last ones you've done? I'm interested in painting them as well. I am the hero John on Instagram as well." Okay, yes, I can send you all of those. And I recently did a fantasy piece based on the reference of the Kristen Aubin from the one you demoed. The one you demoed, you did. Yes. I think I might have seen that one. I vaguely remember um, seeing a piece, so it was probably the one that you did. I I think I looked at it while I was at work, so I didn't really respond. I'm sorry if I hadn't gotten back to you. Okay, so I'm starting to see the forms in the face come out a little bit. I do have to do some um, remeasuring on the placement of the mouth and the lips, and try to make sure that it's placed right. It's looking a little bit off, but I think mostly the bottom of the lips here. If I cut in, and so I'm putting a little bit of yellow and green in the mixture here in the chin, and it's mostly because there tends, and I see it here, there tends to be a color shift between the top of the head and the around the jaw and across the cheeks. Um, I've heard it described before as a Neapolitan, where there's tends to be more orange colors in the forehead, and then reddish across the cheeks and the nose, and then around the mouth a little bit more yellows and greens. And in this photo, you definitely can see that, even though it's very subtle. I wouldn't go with a very strong. When I say green in this case, it's just a little bit of blue and yellow mixed together, and or maybe a little bit a touch of black, to get just a drop in value a little bit without the intensity of color. Okay, so I'm starting to get to a point where I can compare. If I go back and forth, compare the photo and the painting, then I can start to adjust the placement of some of these shapes. That's sometimes what it takes, is just really taking your time and making some of those subtle adjustments until it all starts to come together. And I am going to spend quite a bit of time in the sweater and then the rest of the painting, but tonight I just really want to focus on the face. Like really can't see it here in this photo, but the sweater has a lot of texture and detail, and so I think I'm going to end up spending just about as much time on the sweater too, but not quite as interesting to show a live video of painting a sweater. Try to come up a little bit higher with the eyelid. So this is where I really have to slow down and to try to get the right value, color, and placement. There's just a very thin dark that's her lower eyelid there that's separating it. And if I can carve a little bit of white into underneath her iris here to get the right shape, and then adding a little bit on the top too, which is going to be something closer to black. I can drop a little bit of green in there. See, just come in very carefully and slow. And since I have this nice flat brush, I can use the corner of it for detail. It's not quite as precise as having a very small round for doing detail, but for the way I paint, it's pretty good. Okay, and Jennifer's here. Hi, AJ, joining from Ontario. Ontario. I'm wondering how you avoid over blending, especially when you mix colors directly on your surface. Well, part of the key to that is if you really want to avoid over blending, then make sure that each time you put color down, that you have color on your brush. A lot of over blending comes when you're just taking the brush without paint on it and mixing a, a lot big areas of color that are on already on the panel. And what you're doing is you're kind of neutralizing everything that's on there. If you paint discrete little marks with the brush with paint on it, you're going to get something a little bit choppy. So you do want to make sure that there is some blending going on with the color that's on your brush and the color that's on already on your panel to get sort of those nice alla prima effects. Okay, I need a little dark here in the corner of the eye to indicate where both the eyelashes are and where the eye the corner of the eye is there, and there's a little bit of shadow that's underneath the the eyelid there. It's very subtle, and there's a much stronger line on the bottom lid, the separation between the lid and the white of the eye. And she has, and it really gives her face a certain character, is the shape of her eye here is just a little bit lower in that corner, and makes it her expression feel just a little bit sadder, I guess you would say, or more serious. Okay, and I'm going to pay attention to the change in colors. There's sort of a more neutral dark that's in the shadow here. And if I can get some of that subtlety, then you will start to feel the forms in the eye. And I do see I'm missing, see if I can hold the brush at the right angle, just a little bit of light that's hitting the top of her eye, her bottom eyelid. There, okay. And one more time, see if I can get the dark of her eyelashes. I tried it a few times, and I wasn't getting any paint coming off the brush. There we go. Okay, I am starting to feel that. The light of her eyes have started off just a little bit too low. So I'm going to shift that a little bit. And I'm going to restate where her pupil is. In the photograph, it is almost a very clean black. I didn't have it quite that dark yet. And then I have something close to black on the outer edge of her iris there. So let's see if I can just get a little bit of that going. Still, I have her iris just a little bit too long. So if I can get the white of her eye, especially on the right side here, gets pretty close to pure white. Okay, I'm getting there. That's going to just take a little bit of patience there. I may not get it here while painting live. It may be taking my time later. do want to get a little bit of the red that's in the forehead there. Okay, and hi from Alabama. Oh, Melania's here. So, oh, got a few people watching tonight. That's good. I was feeling kind of lonely in the past few weeks. I only had like 3 or 4 people that hung out with me here. So that's good. So you see, I'm actually doing a little bit of blending here. I'm not really losing any color. I'm just trying to take down a little bit the choppiness of the brush strokes there. Let's get a little more white on my palette. White by far is the color that I use the most. It gets incorporated in just about everything except for some of the shadows and the darks, and just use just about as much white as all the other colors combined. So if you are looking to buy materials and you haven't really painted before, um, it's worth it to buy the bigger tube. I buy the 150 milliliter tubes of Gamblin, and this will last me about a month or two. And if I was buying the smaller tubes, I would probably go through one of those in about 2 weeks. So, um, and it is, you do save a little bit of money by buying the larger tube, not a whole lot. So if you're not doing a lot of painting and you just want to try it, then you can go ahead and buy the smaller tube. I did look into buying the cans of paint to see if I would save a lot. It's not quite as convenient as the tubes, because the paint tends to dry out a little bit quicker in the cans. Because once you open it up, it's a little bit hard to get. You're introducing a lot of air, and then the surface of the paint inside the can will start to dry. So right here, if you look, I don't know how well you can see it on the camera. It's probably a little bit blown out, but there's this area on the top of her nose that is a little bit darker, and I have it in the painting. I have it. There's a much larger step in the value than what's actually in the painting. So my job is um, to to get that a much subtler value change there, that you can still see it, but it's not as quite as strong as what I had. So, and that will start to really help make it feel real when I getting those values much closer to what's in the photograph. And when I say photograph, I mean a an electronic version of the photograph on my monitor. So not so it's about 5 steps removed from life in a certain way. And I do want to make sure that the tip of the nose is the area around the highlight is dark enough so that the highlight does stand out. And the same with um, the bridge of the nose. And I can come in here a little bit thicker with the paint, and that will help the highlights catch even more light. And I tend to like to exaggerate that a little bit. I think that it makes the painting a little more exciting because you can see that it's paint, and it has that kind of the forcefulness of the sort of painterliness of the paint when you actually can get that impasto in just very select areas. Okay, I do, and then I want to straighten the the nose out a little bit. I have it a little bit at an angle, and it's pretty much straight up and down. And I do want to watch things like the corner of the eye. Her corner of the eye comes to right here. The other corner is the corners of the eyes are looking about right. What I don't have is the side of the nose. I have it in a little bit too far. So making those finer adjustments, I'm going to knock that highlight back and do it again so it's in the right place. That's feeling better. And then there's this little bit of a dark here that's well, that's really dark. Gonna paint right over that with much lighter color because I just went too dark right off the bat. Okay, let's get some of that dark off the brush, making a mess. Um, there we go. Okay, so that dark is telling me where the side of the nose really is. And there's a little bit of a reddish color too on the side, although again, much subtler than what I'm painting. So I can come over and paint almost pure white right over the top of that to knock it back just a little bit. Okay, and find some of the shapes in the side of the nose. Okay, this is where I'm slowing down. I almost have to slow down my breathing to get the kind of control that I want. I always think of it like those. I think it's called the biathlon in the Winter Olympics, where the guys who cross country skate, cross country ski with rifles, and then they have to shoot, and then they then go on skiing again. And it's interesting because they really have to have even after doing this exhaustive exercise where their heart rate is up and they're panting really hard, that they do then have to control their breath and their body movement to be able to shoot accurately. And so, kind of think about that when I'm starting to paint really slowly, that I kind of start to control my breathing so that I can steady my hand a little bit better. So Jill says you asked about the light source earlier. This is a in a dark room with one light source, which is a large softbox. Okay, so wasn't too far off. Um, it looks like Jill. It looks like you also did a fair amount of retouching of the photo afterwards. I was going to ask you about that because I see not with the photo this small, but when I had it blown up, I could see that there was a lot more texture in some areas of her skin, and then some areas that seemed much softer. And I felt like that was done in the post production in the um, with Photoshop or Lightbox or some other application. So I was kind of just curious about that. Again, I'm just looking, um, making sure that the changes in values are as subtle in the painting as in the photo. And so that just takes just going back and forth until I have the um, right amount of transition between one area of color and the other. And when you get that right, then something just starts to feel very real and solid. And I tend to exaggerate my colors a little bit too, and sometimes I have to be careful not to go too far because then um, something doesn't feel like it's moving back in space the right way because the colors are too punchy. I'm doing it right there, so I need to some of these colors here I just need to soften a little bit, and then need to make sure that the shadow is getting dark enough. So this is one thing I struggle with a little bit is that I always want my blacks to be as black as they can be if I want something to be a solid black. And I struggle sometimes because the blacks sometimes reflect the light more than the other colors. And so sometimes then they start to, um, depending on where your light source is, how you're painting the panel is lit will be distracting from the actual value structure in the painting, that you'll see some colors lighter than what they really are and some colors darker. So right here along the cheek is one area where I'm struggling a little bit with the reflectiveness of the paint. So I'm going to try to go a little bit darker here. There, it's a little bit better. And try to be a little more accurate with the jawline here. And then I also then want to bring in the form of the hand. That'll give me a little bit more few more reference points to work from. Okay, and again the top of the hand's very foreshortened, so that's going to take a fair amount of work to get that moving in space the way that it needs to. And then the top of the hand gets much lighter, so it's moving, facing much more directly towards the light source there. So right off, that doesn't look too bad. And then the other hand too. And just trying to focus more or less on the silhouette or the shape of the hand, because that in itself is giving me a lot of information about the hand. Most of the values in the hand itself are very close together, and so the most predominant feature of the hand is actually at the outer edge. And there's a area on her cheek where the hair is blocking the light, and the shadow there is quite warm. So that in a way tells me that the light source itself is fairly cool, despite what I said earlier. So you can see I'm starting to build up the sense of form here slowly. You can start to see the front, the bottom, and the tops and the sides of forms. So this was taken in February in Chicago. Okay. Feels like your kids are growing up so fast. Now I have two teenage boys, so they are. That really feels like that they're just zooming along and I'm standing still. Okay, going back to try to get the mouth shape right in the separation. I don't really have enough structure to the mouth yet to really start to feel it. Okay. to take a water break here. It's getting a little bit warm. Excuse me. Okay. So far, no technical difficulties tonight, which is a small miracle because it seems like almost every week I've had a problem with the well, it's still early, but a problem with the sound or the picture going out. And I do have to remember to peek over at the screen to make sure that it no one's texting me madly saying that hey, we can't hear you, or hey, the picture froze. So this is kind of the make or break of this painting is sort of getting um, these subtle colors right here that really help it feel like it's real flesh, getting um, the feeling of light reflecting off her chin and the subtle shadows underneath her lips. And her mouth is just slightly higher on this side. I want to make sure that I get that right. And maybe just a little bit further over. Okay. Then get a little bit of that green that's on the other side. So, one thing I want to say about flesh tones is, in a way, there's no such thing that in the face can be all of the colors of the rainbow and all the values. So, it is possible to have a bright pink, purple, blue, or orange, depending on the lighting. I've done some paintings where there's almost like rainbow colors in the face, just because of the light sources, and some paintings where there are no warm colors at all, that there's just blues and greens. And so flesh tones, the term that sort of people think of as sort of those oranges and pinks. And when I think of making something look like it's actual flesh, it's actually about really looking at the colors there that are either in, when you're painting from a live model, that are in the forms, the sort of natural color, which can be any color, and trying to replicate that with paint and trying to get the right color mixtures. And that's another way to sort of combat that sense of muddiness, is actually looking to try to replicate the colors that are actually there. And when you do that successfully, then it won't look muddy. It's when I think I think the term is sort of, it's over blending, but sometimes it's just not even getting close to the color that makes something look like flesh, um, that sort of naturalistic color that's there. Okay, I need to come in with some of the darks that are around her face. I use this paint scraper to clean my palette, and it's just something that you can pick up at Home Depot or any hardware store. It's just a razor blade holder, and it has a little button that you can pull the blade in or out. That part usually freezes up after a while, and I used to take a pliers and pull it up and down, and then after a while I just decided not to bother with it. If the razor blade is sticking out, it's sticking out, and I just have to be a little bit careful not to cut myself with it, but it's fine. And I am running out of black, and when I say black, I am now using something called chromatic black. It is a color that Gamblin makes, and chromatic black, and it is a mixture of phthalo green and quinacridone red. They're two very bright colors that are on opposite sides of the spectrum, and they're extremely transparent. And so when you mix them together, they make a nice rich black, excuse me, nice rich black color. And so I've changed. I had been using ivory black. I may end up going back to ivory black, but for now I'm using this. And if you work with it without contaminating it, you can get some really nice black um, shadows and effects without using a carbon based black. And I know there's some out there that they've had instructions in the past, or they have part of a painting philosophy that I want to say discriminates against black, that sort of um, tells you not to use black. And I kind of feel like, hey, it's a free world. Use whatever works. For me, I like using black in my paintings. I have more or less what's called a tint tone shade um, color mixing structure. I mean, I do mix colors with each other from across the spectrum, which is more of a complementary color mixing. But overall, I do a huge amount of tinting, which is colors mixed with white. And then I will come in with some grays, either made through complementary color mixing or with white and black mixed together to neutralize the color. And let me see. Um, Jill says her lips were chapped, so soften them as, and she also gets dark circles under her eyes, so even them out as well. I mostly added a bit of color to cheeks and lips as well to make up for lack of sun in the winter. Okay, so that's helpful. Um, I it still looks like there some of the textures also were softened in especially some areas around her cheeks and her eyes where there's a little bit less texture in the photo, but that just may have been the depth of field from the lens. So I'm not going as dark here as in the photo, but I kind of feel like I have to build up the blacks there because I can't quite get there right away. It's just going to take a lot of additional passes with black to get it as dark as I want. I can't, or I don't think I should go in with very thick color because it tends to get a little bit um, gloppy and uneven, and also starts to catch the light too much. So if I can get it sort of thinner wet passes of black, then that ends up getting a little bit better result. And I want to make sure that I get the top of her head in the right place, so I'm going to do a quick measurement again. So right about there. So that looks about right. Okay. So this, and part of the reason why I want to go pretty dark here, as dark as the photo, is because um, to get that sense of luminosity in her face, everything else has to get pushed back pretty dark, and otherwise the background is then going to be competing with her face, and those lights in her face aren't going to seem quite as light. Okay, so just going to do a little bit more of the hair, and then I'm going to get back to my focus of the painting, which is the face. Just needed a little bit of black around her head um, to be able to judge values. Yeah. See, all this white of the panel does does affect how you perceive the colors. Oh, I lost my screen. Hold on. Yep. Okay. That's good. So I don't know if any of you out there are painting along or drawing along. Let me know if you are. I'm kind of curious. Um, and and again, for those who are interested in just starting to paint with oils, I'm putting together some videos and a tutorial for and some of the painting setup information about how to set up your painting area to get started. And I'm going to start off with a monochromatic painting as a demo, as more or less a teaching tool to be able to get past people's fear of color mixing. So all you're doing is mixing values when you're painting monochromatically, and so then you can just get used to how the paint works before you have to worry about doing all the judging of colors. And then you can just start off with 2 or 3 tubes of paint, which means that you can start off fairly cheaply, just to get an idea if you like it or not, and then you can invest more into paints over time. Okay, and to get the little bit separation of the hands here, I do have to go a little bit darker there. Okay, all right. And then this is where I have to start to make some fine adjustments, meaning really slow down and look to see what's going on. So want to alter the whites of her eyes a little bit here. Okay, again, control the breathing. And then she has some very dark red there in the tear duct. And that's a little bit because of the cool light. Those some of those areas that are in shadow will seem very red. Almost purple here in the other side of the eye. Okay, and then underneath her eye is a little bit redder color. Don't have that quite yet. Well, that's a little bit too much, but then there's a dash of orange in there too. Something like that. Um, so Melania asks, "Are you using a Filbert 2 brush?" No, this is a flat or a bright rather, and it's a number 4 bright. So it has a nice flat edge, and I can use that for both detail and for painting wider areas just by um, changing the angle a little bit. There's a little bit of purplish gray here underneath her eye. And just need a little bit more. I have dioxazine purple, and I'm just trying to get just a tiny bit on mixed in the color because it's such a powerful color that it really just a little bit um, goes pretty far. There we go. And then bring another, a little bit more color in her cheek here. And then I have to pay attention to this, a little bit of crease from the corner of her eye, and making sure that I'm going dark enough here. Okay, and then bring that eyebrow down just a little bit. And I want to pay attention to these small distances here between the eyelid and her eyebrow. If you're not careful, some of those things can start to drift apart because they they are usually much closer together than you would think. Okay, and there's a little bit of gray here, which I find the grays hardest to see in a painting. When I'm painting, I'm usually painting everything else but the grays. And then if I don't um, get enough of them in, then the painting doesn't look right. But it's really the grays that sort of hold all those color areas together. So I painted with some pretty thick white here, but I decided I needed to knock it down just a little bit because it just felt a little bit too punchy. Oh, when you just come in too much with the wrong color, then it just really um, takes you back a second. Okay, that's looking a little bit better. Okay. Again, getting kind of quiet here, just trying to concentrate a little bit. Looking, trying to compare values of areas that are next to each other, looking for the relative lightest areas next to the relative darker areas to know how to pull out some of the forms. Okay, and right here I have this streak of some pretty strong color that I'm missing in my painting. So let's see if I can get that in. It goes a little bit, the color's pretty strong, but then it goes pretty dark from there. So let's see if I can get that a little bit richer darks. Okay, I feel like I need to take a measurement of that cheek again because I slowly keep on moving it in, and then I'm wondering if I've pulled it in way too far. Nope, not quite far enough. Let's take that measurement again. So I'm looking from the corner of the nose to the side, and that's in the right place. And then the cheek itself, if I can get this measurement right, is about there. So I'm off almost, almost looks like a half an inch. So the reason why I haven't been able to get that cheek to turn fast enough is I have it way too far out, and that's better. But I still don't have it moving back in space enough, so I'll have to work on the values a little bit. Okay, that's looking a little bit better. Okay, and then need to make sure I go dark enough that's to that area that's near her hair, so it feels like it is underneath the hair. And I'm going to get a little bit punchy with the color here because there is quite a bit of color reflecting off her hair in that one spot. And then almost to black here where um, the hair is turning away from the light in that one spot. Okay. So you guys have gotten pretty quiet out there in YouTube land. At least, I guess watching painting videos might be a nice reprieve from all the politics and stuff going on out there. And I'm not going to be talking about politics here, so don't you worry. But it has been a little bit crazy lately. So just sort of building up sort of those the shapes in the hair a little bit so we can start to feel it. And need to come in with a fairly cool gray here for the part in her hair. And I like to think about it, it's like the same, you know, it's the continuation of her flesh from the rest of her face, but it's a part that rarely gets any contact with the sun, so it tends not to be um, reddish because it's um, not tends not to be suntanned at all. So it's usually a step cooler or greener or bluer than the rest of the face. So it doesn't hurt to get a little bit of blue on the brush there. And then pull up the hair just a little bit there. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's see if I can get that nice red shadow that's along the edge of the nose. And the little bit of light that's hitting the underside of her nostril. So it's going to take a few tries, I think. with a little bit of a darker dark. I wasn't painting quite slow enough at that moment, so I have to clean that up a little bit. Okay, that looks actually pretty good. Let's just get the continuation of the shadow. Hopefully I have that close to the right spot, so I'm going to measure. Hopefully, because I did measure the base of the nose at some point and then adjusted it, but never went back to measure. It's pretty good. So I'm just going to keep it where it is for now. If I have to do an adjustment later, it's going to be a small adjustment. Okay, need to clean up the color a little bit. So one other way to keep colors from getting muddy is just to clean up the brush and clean up the color that you're mixing and working back to sort of the purer colors that you want to get down in the painting. So if I know I want to go a little bit reddish orange here, start off with pure orange and a little bit of pure red and some white, and try to keep the other colors out of it initially. Then you can go knock it down a little bit if it's too bright. Okay, trying to get the shape of that nostril right. Okay, just restating some of those highlights now. Trying not to go too thick like I did before. Okay, and then in this cheek I'm missing quite a bit of the red that's in the photo. So let's try to bring some of that in. And a pretty dark reddish orange that's here. And that's a pretty clean, when I say clean, reddish orange. It doesn't have, it has white in it, but it doesn't have a lot of anything else to neutralize it. So I can almost come over with a little bit of pure orange. There we go. Now starting to get that. And then I'm going to pull the hair in a little bit tighter towards the mouth. Okay. So slowly, slowly I'm starting to see the forms in the face starting to pull together a little bit. So Brian asks, what size canvas do I usually use? So I'm working on panel, gessoed panel. I like it because they're inexpensive, they're easy to store. They they're I like the surface quality. I didn't like for a while unless you buy some very expensive linen, um, primed linen. You the canvas itself has quite a strong texture, and I didn't really care for that too much. And so that's one of the reasons why I started painting on panel, because I can get a very flat um, or almost no texture, or I can get a slight texture depending on the gesso or the sanding. So I have a lot of control there that I can get. Um, Need that reflection is a little bit greenish. Try to come in there a little bit of that. Okay, that was just a little bit too strong, so I knocked that back a little bit. And need to trim the iris a little. So again, looking to try to make sure I get the shape of her eyes where the outside edge is just a little bit lower here, or it just comes down a little bit and is pushed up on the inside. So giving her an even more sort of serious look. Okay. And then the eyebrow is just feeling like it's just a touch too high, so I'm going to come in and start to make it a little bit lower. Okay, it's about 10:15 now. Um, I'll have to decide whether I go all the way to 11 o'clock, or the previous week I stopped at 10:30, which was a good stopping point. I think I had lost most of my audience by then because I think everyone was feeling a little bit tired. And um, so this is starting to come together. I like it. I like where it's going. I can see where I need to go to make it work. Is starting to get the subtleties that I'm looking for. And let's see if I can get that nice warm dark that's separating her hand and chin. And still, there's quite a bit of color. I'm trying to remember if I boosted the colors a little bit in this photo. I can go look back at my history. Um, doesn't look like I did. So this is pretty much Jill's the color of the photo that Jill sent me. Sometimes I do add a little bit more contrast to the images, and that sort of helps me see the value changes a little bit better. Her forehead is, the values are very light and close together, so it is sometimes a little hard to see the change in values and thus find the forms. But I am just going to put in the forms that I know that are there. She'll have a little bit of a raised eyebrow, which I can see very subtly, if I look, there's this line of red that goes from here, but I just want to keep those very subtle. And then kind of a greenish or yellowish light um, that's at the very top of her head here. Like that's too much color. And then that eases into a little bit more reddish color here. So, and then gets darker and redder here on this side of the face, a little more orange. So I am exaggerating that a little bit, but it's helping me see it, and then I can soften up those transitions later. There we go. Okay. And then I know that this area at the bridge of her nose has to be just a little bit darker here to sort of give the feeling that it is pointed down, whereas the area up above here is needs to be a little bit lighter to sort of represent that change in direction. Okay, that's good. So even though it feels kind of brushy right now, you are starting to feel the forms that are in the face. See if I can get that the fold in her eyelid there. It's just using the sharp edge of the brush to get that very thin bit of detail. And then, of course, the almost pure black to get those eyelashes. And then on the lower lid, let me just make sure my picture's still there. The lower lid, just that sliver of dark red. I think that looks pretty close. I may have cut it into it a little bit too much. And then the very corner is sort of a darkish blue that's helping create the roundness of the eyes. Let me get that red in again. Okay, made it a little bit too thick, but when I come in with the light that's on the upper edge of the eyelid, here we go. And then gets lighter towards the middle. Okay, starting to see it. Okay, and then I have to get this edge, this corner dark, much darker. Great. Okay, I'm starting to see it. It's starting to look very Sargent-esque here. Okay, just very subtle corrections here. Yep. Need to finally get out my ultramarine blue here with the whites of the eyes. There's quite a strong blue. That's too light. Need to go a couple steps darker, but I need to get that blue that I see there. And got a little out of blue just gets darker and then just a little bit redder towards the corner. So it's just, at some point, it's just about observation, perception, what the colors you see there, and how they are creating the form. Okay, and I need to get a little punchier with this light in here, for the kind of a little bit of a shininess to the flesh in that one spot, and then it does go a bit darker underneath her eye here. Okay. Okay, so I am kind of at a good spot here. I'm going to wrap this up at 10:30, which is, for those of you in different time zones, that's in about 7 minutes. And Brian, I'm not sure if I really answered your question. What size canvas? Oh, so this is panel again, but it's in this case it's um, 14 by 18, and I like to try to paint something close to life size. I usually have to guesstimate what that is, since I can't measure if it's from a photograph. I don't have the model here to measure exactly what that is. And I'm going to try to mimic the color of the sweater a little bit, which is sort of this creamy color. But I tend to work in standard sizes that the panels come in. So that's, I know there's some smaller sizes, but my smallest size is 8 by 10, and then 9 by 12, 11 by 14, 12 by 16, and then 14 by 18, and then I'll go up a little bit larger from there, which 16 by 20, and then sometimes 18 by 24. So that's basically all the sizes that I paint in. I suppose for a special project I may go larger. I have cut panels down to metric sizes when I have a European client that has particular frames that they're trying to match, and they have just metric size frames to work from. Okay, and shift. Want to get a little bit more of the black in here. That's creating the richness of color in the highlights of the hair. Trying to pull a little bit of the red out from that side of her nose, and need to get a little bit of more of a transition color between the light and the dark in the nose, and that color is a fairly bright red. So this is where I have to be careful not to blend too much. I really want to keep the colors as they shift. It's a little bit better. And I need to get the darker part of the shadow in here. It's part a little bit of what it's missing. Okay. So I think this is a pretty good stopping point. Thank you all for watching. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please do. That way you'll get notifications when I do the next painting. And for those of you who are watching the replay of this, please also subscribe, leave a comment after I've ended the video. That way people can see the comments. They won't necessarily see the chat that's gone on. I would just say in about 5 minutes, if you can, just leave a comment, a thank you, and a thumbs up, whatever you want. And I will see you all next week. Oh, real quickly. So next week, I'm going to be painting Jill's other daughter. There was a group of 4 photographs that I put up for a little bit of a vote um, on Instagram, and enough people said that they wanted me to paint all 4 photos that I put up. That's what I'm going to do, and that will be the fourth of those 4 paintings. And it's her younger daughter in a beautiful dress reading a book, and I'm very excited about doing that painting. And again, I won't be able to do it all in the live session, but it will give me a lot to work on over the week. Um, and all of these I will post in progress and finished paintings to Instagram, so you can look for them there. Anyway, thank you all, and have a great evening.